In this episode, I discuss challenges associated with protecting your energy when there is a lot of change happening in your life and the lives of those around you. Welcome to Monologues by Hassie. Between March and April of 2025, I missed about 4 weeks of podcasting. And somebody asked me, what happened? Why didn't you podcast? And there's multiple reasons for that. And the reason is I was struggling to protect my energy and my time. There've been a lot of changes in my life recently. I've taken a office job, again, a corporate job. It is still in the tech world, but it is in sales, so it is different to what I've done, and that means there are new challenges I'm dealing with, and I knew I was going to be dealing with. And naturally also some challenges in that role that are unexpected, that I did not expect to be dealing with, that I now have to dedicate, time and unfortunately, sometimes a lot of energy too, which means when I come out of that work environment, I have been drained. And this is something that I'm actively trying to improve, and it has been improving. And I always knew that the teething phase, the first few months of being in this role, I'm what they call a sales development representative, which is a story for another day, which I will go into in another podcast. But being in this role means that I knew that there was going to be a kind of ramp up period of where I would go from struggling to do the job to hopefully doing really, really well. Well, not hopefully. I know I will do really, really well by my own metrics. And that's because it's something that I see as being a very valuable long-term skill. But this has meant that initially, during that ramp up, I knew I was going to be very depleted. And that has 100% been the case. Now, in addition to this, there are the unexpected things that have been happening, outside of what I've been, outside of my own life, And that has been things like friends going through tough periods and me needing to support them. Also friends having joyous events, weddings, and getting married and doing things to support them as well, celebrate those moments. So the demands on me in this period have been quite high, which is quite challenging. So in this episode, I really wanted to speak about, protecting time and energy, or how I've been struggling to protect my time and energy. Now, maybe a few years ago on this podcast, I had an episode where I spoke about the whole concept of, in aeroplanes, that when there's an emergency, they will always instruct that you put your own oxygen mask on first before you look after those around you, before you make sure that they put their oxygen masks on. And there's a very good reason for that. If you're conscious enough to reach for your oxygen mask, or you're an adult and you can comprehend those instructions, then it makes a lot of sense, and you owe it to yourself to look after yourself so you can look after those who can't. And this is very important. So when these unexpected demands appeared, and for example, friends who are going through a tough time, naturally there are things you had to drop. And the ball I had to drop was doing things like being on this podcast, because my weekend had to go towards supporting a friend who was in need as of late. But even when I did this, I was very clear that I still needed time on the weekend to recharge where I couldn't be there. And I basically said, here's what I can do and here's what I can't. I was very clear. Even though if the people who needed me could have availability to all of my hours, all of my 24 hours, they would take that, and not out of ill will, not out of malice. They would take that out of their need, their hurt, their pain, be it in a personal sense, in a professional sense. They would consume me without regard for what I'm going through. Again, not out of ill will, not out of malice, but because of the state they're in. And it was up to me to, to make it clear that I'm going to be for them, to support them, and naturally drop some of the things I do, like this podcast, but also state that, hey, I need to protect my energy. This is my day where I need to prepare to deal with challenges in another domain, but also so I can be there for you later, and to support them in ways that you can support without draining your energy as well. So you do some intensive care and some less intensive care. And I think this is really important, because you always think about people who are caregivers and are in a position where they're taking care of people in over a very, very long span of time. and they neglect themselves. And they neglect themselves to the point where they become bitter and they become cynical. It is very challenging, especially for somebody like me who's in this new role, and you face a lot of rejection in the world of sales. It's something you need to get used to, but that doesn't mean it doesn't take a toll on you. And the activity levels, at least at the level I'm at, are quite high. You always need to be doing things. And so I'm quite drained, and then to have to also absorb, I think, the challenges people are going through it's a very tough thing to do on top of that. But naturally, I'm happy to be there. I love my friends and my family. And if they're, genuine friends and family, then I'm always going to try and make time to be there for them. And so I do that, but I've been doing it now in a way where I'm reminding people that for me to keep being able to support them, I need to look after myself and support myself. And that means setting boundaries. Like I said, if I were to give a hurt person in my network availability to all my 24 hours, they would take it with complete disregard for my own needs. But just like when you're in the aeroplane, you do need to put your own oxygen mask on. Same thing goes for something at work. If there's a fire at work, you need to support work in a capacity, but I guess a capacity that doesn't hurt work in the long run. So there has to be, I guess, you can't be too short-sighted with the intensity and energy you're giving to a fire. Naturally, like I said, there are times when you do need to drop things, and I did drop things to make sure I could support the people I care about. But you also need to care about you. And that's where I think setting strong boundaries comes in at work. I make sure that I go into the office and I make sure I spend my time working. But then once that laptop gets closed, try not to open it. And I made sure that I haven't opened it at home, right? To go and do follow-up and things like that. If I need to do that, stay at the office. I'm trying to, at least from an energetic perspective, create a clear boundary between work and not work. Now, that doesn't mean I won't ever take advantage of work from home, but at least in my current context, where I am going through quite tough transition, entering the world of sales, and also having things that are happening outside my life and dealing with my own physical energy levels, which are now adjusting slowly to the fact that, hey, you're back in the office, 9 to 5, 9 to 6, you're commuting 2 hours per day. I'm dealing with these things on top of everything that's been happening in my life. And this also means other aspirations I've had. So I've still been dating, I've still been going through dates amongst this. But in terms of protecting energy, that's another area where I've also become much more strict. As soon as I realize that something is not worth pursuing, I make it very clear that it shouldn't go further, where a previous version of me would have entertained those relationships much longer, even to the detriment of other things. But I think now I'm so aware of where my energy needs to be distributed, I do need to make very clear decisions, even in the world of dating. As soon as I realize after, could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, God knows however many dates, that something is not right, then in that early phase, I'm being much more strict. And that's also been a great way that I've been protecting my energy. So that's one thing I've been doing. The other thing is being very clear with people, like I said, letting them know. And I hope this is something that you guys are doing. When somebody does need help, make sure that, you're helping them in a way where you can help them again in the future, or you're helping them in a way where they can help themselves. That's probably even the better option. But remember, when people are suffering, they will want to throw water on the fire that they're dealing with. And that might mean depleting you of all your water and leaving you depleted and vulnerable to a fire. And so even when I've helped friends, it's let's do it. We'll do Friday night, we'll do Saturday, but Sunday I need to take to myself. I need my solitude. I need to meditate. I need to look after my own priorities. And in looking after my own priorities, I've been making sure that I've been meditating daily, which can be a challenge at times, but even on the train going into work, I'm making sure I'm protecting that energy. If I have to spend that time commuting, I'm making sure that I'm spending 15 minutes of it in silence with my eyes closed, body scanning. I have been also making sure I'm doing my exercise. That has been a non-negotiable. I'm running my 20 kilometers. I've been swimming my 2 kilometers. I've been doing my calisthenics workouts. Getting those in means that I'm just looking after myself. I'm protecting my energy. I've carved out time for those things. But like I said, there are times where certain things get dropped, like this podcast, which got dropped for 4 weeks as I dealt with all of these changes that were happening in my life and in the lives of those around me. And the time I was carving was purely so I could rest. Like, that's the level of depleted I have been for the last 2 months. And it's, important for me to make sure that I am looking after myself so I can keep progressing on my own goals, but also help the people around me. That is a very important thing. And so, my prompt to those of you, I guess, who are listening to this is, where in your lives, and especially if you're a giver, I think if you're somebody who likes to give, where are you giving too much? And I don't mean giving and think about ways to cut back, but where are you giving so much that you yourself are depleted? Where are you giving so much that you actually compromise your ability to give in the future? And what boundaries, what guardrails can you add to protect some time and protect energy for yourself so you can do the things you love? And in the case of this podcast, one great reminder for me is I spoke about systems earlier, and clearly I did not have sufficient buffers in place to deal with the shocks to my other systems. So the buffer for this podcast would have been making sure that more episodes are recorded in advance so I can actually do a better job of looking after the crises and challenges that appear in my life and the lives of my friends and family around me, whilst also not feeling guilty for not progressing on the things I love, like doing this podcast and sharing the challenges and learnings that I'm figuring out as I go on my journey. So I will end this episode there, and to those of you who are listening to this, I wish you great success on all your endeavors. You've just made it through another episode of Monologues by Hassie. It brings me great pleasure to know that you made it to the end. To listen to more episodes, subscribe on your favorite podcast app or visit monologuesbyhassie.com. Thanks for swinging by.